You're listening to episode 1 of Doubling Down, a podcast about the double standards we see every day.
This is Fonzie,
Aishwarya,
Renee,
and Andrea.
And today we'll be discussing the expectations with different genders in a school setting.
So let's look through the looking glass and catch up with our doubles.
Somewhere we can most easily notice double standards is in STEM classes and extracurriculars. Did you know only 27% of female students take AP Computer Science in America?
Here's what math teacher and robotics advisor Mr. Burrows had to say.
There have been gender disparities. There was 1 year where we were almost 50% women, but usually it's less. I think this year it's nominally 25% women, although if you look at who's usually there, it's less. So I think for high school clubs in general, it's hard to walk through the door. And it's easier to walk through the door if you see people who are like you. So when we've had more girls, we get more girls. When we have fewer girls, we get fewer girls. STEM has kind of a reputation for being a little bit odd or nerdy or geeky, and I think those reputations get in the way of either boys or girls joining. I think it's harder for girls because of that reputation than it is for boys.
A common trope in a lot of coming-of-age movies is the makeover.
Right. I mean, we see a lot of people in movies, they just take off their glasses or they let their hair down, and all of a sudden there's someone else and they become a prom queen or they become a beauty queen, like in The Princess Diaries or in She's All That, where they just go from someone they weren't. They become someone they weren't.
Yeah, aside from physical appearance, another thing I think it's almost like it's implying that the loss of their individuality should be celebrated.
I think a good example of a TV show that has done a pretty good job of depicting a well-rounded character is like Mariana from The Fosters and later Good Trouble. And especially in Good Trouble, you see how she graduated from MIT and she works at like a startup or like this big tech company actually. And you realize that even though she's still the party girl and she's still like this epitome of like a pretty girl, she has this amazing career and this amazing education in one of the best schools in America. This really gets the point across that even though we see a lot of this stereotyping happening, like Mr. Burrows said earlier in his interview, it really encourages girls and women to really step out of their comfort zone and do something that the world has basically told them that is impossible. Mm-hmm. Double standards, though, exist for guys, too, I would say, in this setting. I mean, living in the Bay Area, if you see someone's dad, you're like, oh, does your dad work at Google? Oh, does your dad work at Apple? And I feel like this common misconception of, like, working in the tech industry and that's just what they do. And if you have a guy, you're saying, oh, wait, you're actually maybe a role that is thought to be reserved for women, like nursing or teaching and things like that. It's like there's often this misconception there that the only thing guys can do are like tech-related jobs, right?
And like that just reminds me of my 3rd grade elementary school teacher. Actually, he went to Stanford and Princeton for grad school later. Dang. And he was an engineer at like some place, and now he's been an elementary school teacher, and he's like one of the best teachers I've ever had. So like this idea that like men can't be in these stereotypically feminine jobs like teaching and can only stay in these masculine jobs like tech, I think that also is detrimental, because like teachers like this teacher I had like add to the teaching landscape and contribute to what we learn. So by keeping people out of these careers, we lose that enrichment.
I kind of see that from my dad's perspective, because sometimes he'll say that whenever I say like, oh, I have parents that are nurses, and then sometimes I had people come to me like, oh, you have 2 moms? Like, no, I have a mom and a dad. They're both registered nurses. And so I think there's like that stigma thinking that doctors are males and then nurses are females. So I can kind of see like where you three are coming from about how there are these stereotypically female and male jobs. So going back to like the whole idea of like school, I think it definitely starts out in school. School is like the roots of everything, because we need to like understand like what are we teaching these students, what are we teaching our kids, because these people are going to be the future of they're going to be the future, and it's important that what we teach them carries over to their later lives. So right now, if what we're exposing to students about stuff being that's like predominantly female, predominantly male, they're going to have this mindset that they're going to take with them.
I definitely agree with that, and I also think that like even as we aim for diversity, we also need to like quash these stereotypes coming from within, because like a couple weeks ago I volunteered at this like STEM fair that this elementary school nearby was having, and a lot of the like almost all of the boys who had like their poster boards at the STEM fair, they were doing like quote unquote like hard sciences, like this is an electromagnet, this is a robot I coded to do my algebra homework, like that was an actual thing. But all the girls, like they tend to do like this is the science of dreams, like more fluffy things like that. And not to say that these sciences aren't, like social sciences aren't valid, those are totally valid. But like I feel like girls are being steered away from the hard sciences because they're for boys. And I especially remember this one little girl I talked to, she had done a poster about like making a speaker so you can listen to your music and have fun. And like the principle behind the speaker was the use of an electromagnet, and so I was like, do you know what this electromagnet does and how it works? And she was like, I want to know, but I don't really know, but the boy over there a couple rows away did a really cool poster about electromagnets. So like what I really noticed from that was that these girls, it's not that these girls aren't interested in these like hard sciences, it's just no one is encouraging them to pursue them further, but they are like deeply interested in it still.
Yeah, and that's another thing I noticed. It's not just in our STEM programs, it's in our extracurricular activities as well. Like for me, I'm interested in color guard and dance and cheer a little bit. And I remember when I was auditioning for a cheer, I was the only guy that was auditioning. And then I remember a few years ago where we had Kenneth, who was the only male cheerleader in Homestead. And in color guard for me, there's only 2 boys, but when I first joined, I was like one of the only boys on the JV team, and then, but I also noticed that a lot more boys have been joining. But when I try to get more boys to join, they're like, oh no, it's mostly for girls, and because it's a activity that's predominantly female, and you mostly see females doing it. But if you actually see like professionals out there, you see that there's actually a lot of guys. And then also in football as well, where we had Eden Ovadia, which she was a female football player. So I think that what the stuff that we want to do, like the how we want to have fun, stuff that like brings us happiness, it's also kind of like set by a boundary because of what's meant for females and what's meant for males to do.
There have been claims in the past that Battle of the Classes reinforces gender stereotypes by swapping the traditional roles for guys and girls in cheer and powder puff.
This is what senior Ben Gu, who was part of the seniors BOTC cheer team, said about it. Do you think BOTC does break down those roles, or does it reinforce them in a way?
Oh, I think they definitely break them down. It's pretty obvious that the stereotype is that males are football and then females are cheerleaders, just because it's like, I guess like males are biologically more physically strong, I guess. Yeah. Like as a female, if you want to play football, I really don't know how you would go professional with that. I'm sure there are leagues, but like I'm still too ignorant about all the leagues for football that are out there. And I'm sure like for a male, there are male cheerleaders, I'm sure. It's just like I feel like in the cheerleading industry, if you want to make it big, you have to have the looks for females.
He did make some good points about like how events like BOTC are meant to like break the roles of like gender norms, but I feel like in some cases, people are right. It does reinforce them a little bit. Like, you have girls in positions where guys are supposed to be, right? And I feel like I see this a lot with, like, guys who, like, there's a lot of, they try to, like, dress up and they do things that are predominantly feminine, like with our cheer team and BOTC, like, but I feel like sometimes it just makes it feel more like it's reinforcing the stereotypes,
like
and
a mockery almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think like BOTC, while it does have like good intentions in trying to swap these roles, like you said, it does reinforce it more, mainly because it presents it, like the swapping of these roles, as a novelty rather than something that should be normalized. Like, ooh, once a year the guys get to do like all the cheer stuff and the girls get to do all the, you know, manly football stuff. And like, since it's presented as such like an unusual thing, it's not really achieving all of its intended purpose of making it more normalized.
Yeah, something that really struck with me about what Ben said is that there's no female football team, there's no higher female league, even like no, and there's like always a running joke about the WNBA being, they get paid less, and they're kind of just a joke basketball league when they really should, and the NBA is really like everyone really cares about that. And I think like just in sports leagues you consistently see female athletes getting paid less.
I think this like all goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, like media coverage and how that also acts as a gateway. Like, as you see yourself represented in these fields more, you feel like, oh, I can do that too. But
in the end, though, it's still that question of how to break down these stereotypes without putting up new ones at the same time.
Thanks for listening to Doubling Down. We hope we've helped you recognize why and how you've been seeing double.
Doubling Down is a student-run podcast. The opinions expressed are solely those of the speakers and do not reflect the opinions of the Epitaph or Homestead High School.